All right, this video, in terms of end of the year content, are my surprises and my honorable mentions. All right, so basically among all the end of the year videos, you'll get to see like my top 20-ish books. This is books 10 through 20-ish, not in a particular order. Some of them are like, these are for sure books that should have landed, and they did because they're authors I love. And then we'll talk about like, these really hit, and they surprised me that they hit. And we'll talk more in my top 10, which will come up next week. But this year was a little weird. I feel like it wasn't as easy to like gather my top books, even though I don't feel like it was a slumpy reading year. Maybe I'm just being stingier and less things are like sticking out. But that said, I really enjoyed all these books. I recommend all of them. And let's get into it, starting with The Roundhouse by Louise Erdrich, a prime example of an author who's just doing what she does great, which I love. This is like my 6th book by her. I've read quite a few. It's not quite my favorite, and she does a lot of community work in her stories. I find that if you like to have well-built communities, I can't recommend anyone more highly than her. This is no exception. We have a young man who's in this town. His mother has had to go through this horrid thing, and they don't really tell him about it. So he's watching his parents grieve and heal, sort of, mostly also avoiding the issues that exist, while also being a preteen teenager with his friends, having hobbies, discovering sexuality. And I think it's done really good. That tension between wanting justice, but also what do you actually get with the law and what does justice look like? And I think it's a really tough read for so many reasons. Definitely one where if you are someone who typically looks up content warnings, I would recommend that you do. And yeah, now I have one more book in that trilogy to read. I've been reading them in like reverse order by accident because my first book by Louise Erdrich is La Rose, which I think is like the 3rd book in this kind of like cycle in Louise Erdrich's work. This is the 2nd book I read by her this year, but it's by far my favorite. Love Medicine was good, but not as good for me as this one. Another one where it's like, of course this author is going to be great is The Curse of Chalion by Lois McMaster Bujold. I really love her books. Now, this is not like an instant I'm adoring this, obsessed with it like I was with Verkosigan, but I still read the majority of this in one day. And it's a relatively dense fantasy book. You can read this as a standalone. It is a part of a larger world, and chronologically, it's one of the first books in that world. In terms of like the trilogy of books. Like there's Paladin Souls takes place after this with a character from this book. But the plot that's introduced in this wraps up, so if you want to treat it like a standalone, you can. Things I really like about this book. We have the book from the perspective of the mentor. The mentor-mentee trope is amazing. I've loved it my whole life. I've never had it from the mentor. We have this like 35-ish year old character who's having to take on his young charge, who is a princess to be. There's a curse among the land that they are like slowly getting enveloped in and have to figure out, and he wants no part of it. He has gone through it. He is jaded. He simply wants to eat and be housed, don't we all? And I think just his character really resonates these days, and so I really enjoyed that part. I really enjoyed the princess and her friends and just how it unfolded. And I think the lore of this place is really cool. And it goes places you don't expect. Like, I do feel like the first half of this book was very different from the second half of this book. And like, what I thought I was getting versus what I got. But it's Bujold being Bujold. So like you really can't go wrong. So that was a great time. And then the other one that's like truly like, of course this was going to be great. Like, why wouldn't it be great? And this is The Potency of Ungovernable Impulses by Malka Older. This is also my 6th Malka Older. I read her Centennials trilogy. It starts with Infomocracy. This is in her Massa Plady world, where we have this detective scholar duo solving mysteries. And I really liked this one. It's the longest of the 3. I think technically it's a short novel and not a novella, but it's still very much on the short side. I love the audio narrator for this. It was just another great time. I don't like detective stories that often, but I like the Massa and Plady version. I love seeing the world building on Jupiter. I thought the academic setting of this one was very interesting and petty in fun ways. I liked getting to really engage with Massa's neurodivergencies and mental health issues, and how much Massa just doesn't read the room was really good. So just another standout in that trilogy. I think that one and the first one are my favorite. Really good. Now, these other two are still like, they should have hit, and they did, but did surprise me in different ways. And then we'll just get into the surprises. We'll start with the Akwakia Mezi I read, which was You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty. So I've read other Akwakia Mezis. I've read Pet, and I've read Freshwater. Very different books. Akwakia Mezi does not get pigeonholed into a genre. They will write what they want to write, and unapologetically so. This is a contemporary romance that is heavy on the mess. And I knew that, and that's why I wanted to read it, and my friend Evie sent it to me. I don't know if I would have bought it on my own just because I don't buy contemporary romances. And I read this, and it was so fun and so messy and so emotionally affecting. Like, there were things that really landed for me in this one. So the premise of this is our main character lost their husband, essentially soulmate connection, 5 years before we start this book. And they are just starting to decide, are they physically available? Not even emotionally available, physically available when we start this book. And that leads to them sort of starting a platonic, but with the implication that maybe more could happen, relationship with this character. It's really messy how we even get to that point. And then she goes on a trip with this guy, meets this guy's dad, and is like instant love connection with his father. So again, heavy on the mess. If that gives you hives, don't pick this up. I have many friends who are like, that stresses me out. I'm like, fair. Absolutely fair. This relationship though is so emotionally grounded. And I could truly believe how they truly just like met each other and were just like, wow, we align. We are connected. Other people probably will be like, this is insta-love. I don't get where it comes from. For me, I had complete buy-in. I love how soft the hero is. I love how emotionally grounded he is and how you can definitely feel that he has lived a life and he has certain morals that he follows and he's so caring. Especially because we have to deal with them handling the mess that this creates. This isn't something that just gets waved away. You have to deal with the fallout of the mess, and I thought that was handled really well. And yeah, I had a good time. It's a good, like, also vacation romance sort of thing. Like, if you like a romance where you just truly get to sink into the fantasy of, like, everything's taken care of. You don't live in the real world anymore. Which I sometimes like in my romance books. So I read this very quickly, most of it in a day, which is how I like to read my contemporary romance. And I am now very excited for the romantasy that we have out by this author. The other one that I read by an author that I've read from before is The Djinn-Bot of Shantyport, which is criminally underhyped. Oh my goodness. And it's partially because there's no audiobook, and it's partially because the first book he wrote could not be more different than this. And I think that's why that's surprising, because I read his first book, which I think was The City Inside. It was a city book. It was a near future sci-fi in India. This is far future, other planet robots. Okay? It's an Aladdin retelling in space, sentient robots. So good. It's so fun, so action-packed, also thematically resonant about robot rights and what makes something sentient and consciousness, while pretty much seamlessly layering in the parts of the Aladdin retelling we all love. And specifically, it does lean on the Disneyified version a little bit, while also hearkening back to some of the more original roots. And I just had a blast with it, and I was just not expecting such a genre work, because the last work was so more literary. And I've read a short story by this author recently, and like, I do think that for better or worse, the first book we brought over from India was just a little bit more literary than maybe how he normally plays, but that kind of typecasts it. And I don't know why they chose not to go the audiobook route with Tor, but they didn't. And in this day and age, I think it would have been perfect with an audiobook narrator, and it just doesn't exist. One thing I'll also say, it has a really fun narrative framework where we have a genie bot that is recording and responding to and kind of also gaining emotions throughout the story. So it's a first-person story that reads like a third-person story, and I think that's just very clever, and I think it was done really well. And yeah, gender bent as well, if you want that. And I had a blast. So those were like books that, of course, like, I think I have given the other authors all like 4.5 to 5 stars before, so having 4.5 star experiences again, not shocking. Now, these other ones are surprises just for different reasons. We'll start with one that, like, if you had asked me at the start of this year that I would have read this type of nonfiction book, I would have been like, nah. And that's Hello Sleep. Hello Sleep is actually kind of a big pivotal book that I've read this year for a couple reasons. One, I hate having insomnia. I've had it on and off my whole life. I will continue having it on and off my whole life. But serendipitously, me bringing it up, I was recommended to read this nonfiction because it was a pretty grounded, not fear-mongering work on sleep science and how to deal with insomnia through cognitive behavioral therapy, which is something I have used in therapy and I know kind of works for me. And I read it all in a day. And it was so helpful for my type of hyperfixation brain of just like digging into something, and it made me comfortable. It made me have a better relationship with sleep. I was less scared. Now when I can't fall asleep at night, I am less scared of what that means. I trust that my body will take what it needs to take if I give it the opportunity to. It was just really good. But then, just like as an aside, then someone in my comments was like, have you listened to the Maintenance Phase podcast episode when they talk about this nonfiction book, which I have not read, nor do I recommend, because they were debunking it. And like this type of one, it scares me. I don't want to be told that like you're more likely to die if you don't get enough sleep. Like I don't think that's helpful. And also this book is not well researched or factually accurate. That's what I've learned. And that led to Ryan and I listening to so much Maintenance Phase. Like to the point where like I wish I could put it in as like a book read. I have listened to 2/3 of the collection that's out now over the past 5 years. So that was really surprising to me, and it's been a force of good in my year. Another one is The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. So this is one of those cases where I typically have a 4-star experience with the author. I don't really get the hype. And then this one, I'm like on the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm like, I gave it 4.5 stars and I like it more than the average person in the fandom. And I'm like, what happened here? I had a really fun time with it. It's can be read as a standalone. I think there might be talks to have more stuff in this world. It's definitely a world inspired by our own, even though it's slightly different. I only honestly clock this because I know it really bothers one of my friends. But for me, it was actually kind of helpful because I get exhausted by proper nouns in terms of world building. So to have proper nouns that kind of crib from our proper nouns, but slightly differently, just like made me have less brain energy that I needed to be using so I could focus on these weird characters. And it's very much Suicide Squad and like questing and like they just keep having to react and figure out a thing and solve the problem and deal with their mess. And I thought the audio acting was great and I just had a good time. Like I simply had fun and that's all I really wanted. And I guess other people didn't have fun or didn't have as much fun or wanted something else. I don't know. It worked really well for me. And I've read the First Law trilogy twice and I like it more than anything in there. So that's where I land. Next up, we'll talk about the Nayla Hopkinson I loved this year, which is Black Heart Man. And I was surprised about this one for a couple reasons. One, just how much I liked it. It was just so propulsive for me. I was just in it from the beginning. We have Vicosi, this wild character. You meet him trying to fix a plumbing problem and he makes it worse. Amazing. Love Vicosi. He's definitely like your center point of the story. And I think for me, this is the first work I've read by her where she truly does choose like primarily one character to tell the story through their actions and worldview. And I just really enjoyed it. I was also surprised that so few people have read it. It's really good. It's really easy to read. It's very fun and engaging. But like so few people have read this book. And especially because she's such a powerhouse in speculative fiction, especially Caribbean speculative fiction, I was just shocked. So I read 2 of her works this year. This is my favorite that I have read. And I did vote for it when I could. And I was happy to see it on 2 shortlists this year because that is why I read it. And I'm hoping it also got other people to read it. Let's see. We'll do The Scholar and the Last Fairy Door next. I don't know this author. I now have another book by them on my TBR. I showed that to you guys in my 26 and 26 earlier this week. And I just read this because my friends in the UK wanted to read a book by this author. I believe it's a UK-based author. And I was like, sure. I knew nothing about it. Nothing. I knew the title and I was like, okay, I'm getting some Narnia vibes. Like, what are we doing with this door situation? It has nothing to do with Narnia. I really liked this. Easy, entertaining, 4.5-star read. Like, so good. Especially if you like a magic school setting and you're just like itching for that in like an adult form. I thought this was really good. You don't spend your whole time at the school, and I actually really liked how much story we get in this standalone book. But it is about these friends who meet at this magical school. Our main character is not from a wealthy family, so she kind of has that class divide. And something happens that changes the nature of their friendship, and then you fast forward and you see they resolve that, don't resolve that as adults. And with the meta plot of like, fairy doors are gone. I think this takes place between World War I and World War II, how magic works now because we have closed the fairy doors, who has access to the magic and why. Really fun and really smart story, I feel. And then my last two are basically my romantasy wins, because I typically bounce off of romantasy pretty hard. And these two really surprised me in how much I loved them. One being The Bridge Kingdom. I haven't read more in this series yet. I've only read the first 2 books because they're like 6 books, but 2 book, duologies. And I immediately purchased the second book to read after I finished the first book, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I know exactly how this is going to end. I'm here for it, not ready for it, need to read it. It was like binge watching a TV show. I was so invested. Yeah, I just had a really fun time, and I now am more intrigued by the other books in this series, and also she has a different fantasy duology out that I would like to give a go. I just generally found and it was dual POV, and I really liked that it was a marriage of convenience, but also she was there to spy, to help people take over, and she was brainwashed, and I just thought it handled the emotional messiness really well. It was a lot like reading like Throne of Glass for the first time, which, for better or worse, is nostalgic for me. Like, I actually don't really like the Throne of Glass series, but I like a tightly paced, plotty, bingeable story like this, and I don't see that much anymore, and this was great. It was exactly that. It was a better version of that for me. And then the last one, this is the young adult version of The Mask of Mirrors. Like, actually. Like, maybe not actually. Mask of Mirrors is definitely, for sure, like, elite tier. But this was really fun, and that's Heartless Hunter, which is the first in a duology. And the reason why I compare it to Mask of Mirrors is that, like, there's a lot of Batman Catwoman energy here, and I find that also exists in the Rook and the Rose trilogy. Here we have a world where witches are not allowed to exist. Our main character is a secret witch, and our other character is a witch hunter. And he actually is a witch hunter. He actually really believes that witches shouldn't exist. And it really does create a lot of rich, juicy tension. And they start to fake date each other. And they're both fake dating each other, thinking they're going to pull one over on the other. And it's very fun. Like, I find it so engaging and enriching. And I kind of, now that I'm talking about it, want to read it again. Like, it was just so smartly done, really well paced, had just enough world building to be like engaging, but not so much. We were just like gonna poke holes in it because it actually doesn't make sense. I do think it tries to bite off more than it can chew in the sequel, but for the romance part of it, I still had such a fun time. Like, it had so many good executions of certain tropes, and I really liked the character arcs, and I just truly believed why these characters were at odds and both had the feelings that they did. So those are my surprises. Those are my honorable mentions. And next week is my birthday week, so I will be doing my top 10 as I always do during my birthday week. I haven't decided if it'll drop on my birthday or the day after. Time will tell. Let me know what your surprises and honorable mentions have been of the year so far, and any recommendations you've read that you think I would like based off these books that I really love. Feel free to leave those in the comments as well. And if you just want to leave an emoji to let me know you're here, I don't know if I really have like a favorite of this section, but let's do a robot for the Gin Bot of Shantyport. And otherwise, like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.